heat. The garden here at Longmeadow is actually holding its own surprisingly well, but inevitably some plants are going over quicker than others. And you have to be brave and not hang on to them, but cut them back. And quite a few, like the Peter, for example, will reflower. Of course, some plants, like this fennel, are completely happy with the hottest and the driest weather that Britain can give it. These are plants adapted to Mediterranean weather, and they will look really good all summer long without a drop of water. Coming up on today's show, Adam gets an exclusive invitation to join His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales to discuss why our gardens and countryside are under threat from new pests and diseases.
We're faced by a multitude of threats of every kind of disease. We have to take this really seriously.
And Carol celebrates the glory of the agapanthus.
There is nothing mundane or ordinary about agapanthus. They're truly the stars of the summer border.
To other things, I shall be summer pruning my step over apples. This bed was intended to be filled with purple asparagus, and they were planted. However, they haven't happened. So I'm going to use this bed for another crop. And I'm going to put in some leeks. Now, leeks are one of those crops that follow an earlier harvest. Classically, potatoes or perhaps peas, broad beans. You follow them up with leeks, which are put in June and July, and then they will sit all winter long, ready to harvest as and when you want them. Normally, I plant leeks using a dibber. This is simply an old fork handle that I've sharpened off, and I only ever use it to plant leeks. But the idea is that you make a hole in the ground with it, nice and deep, and you pop the leek in there, and then you don't fill it back in, you just water it in, and gradually the roots take hold, which is sweeter and better. However, the problem with this dry soil is you dip into it, and it tends to fill in. It's like dipping into a sand dune. So I'm going to try something else. If I get bored and draw a shallow trench like that. Okay, there we go. Now the idea being is I place those there and I will backfill, trying to get these as deep as possible. And it wouldn't matter if you buried them that deep underground. You won't harm it at all. It's not going to die on you because it's buried. As long as there's some green above ground, they'll be completely happy. And the deeper it is beneath the soil, the more that will be blanched. So if you like your leeks white, put them in deep. Now what I'm going to do is cover these over this. And then I'll fill up the other side of the trench. Now I'm putting these about 6 inches apart. The closer you put them together, the smaller they will be. Now the one place you shouldn't plant them is where you have grown an allium crop previously. So if you've lifted garlic, don't put leeks into that space, because all alliums, leeks, garlics, shallots, will transmit viruses and diseases that only affect them. It's too late to sow leeks now, but you can buy them from suppliers in plugs, get them in the ground, and then you will have a harvest from now right through till next spring. Now, really important for leeks is to water them in well. And make sure they have a soak at least once a week. I'll go and refill my can. I confess, even with a lifetime's experience, really good soil, lots of space, it can be quite tricky growing vegetables when we don't get rain for weeks on end and the sun blazes down. You would think it would put you off forever, but that's not the case for Frances, as she returns to her shared allotment with unabated enthusiasm.
Something over the last month. The allotments are absolutely teeming with produce around every corner, and it's so exciting to finally be harvesting. But there is one job that we can't avoid, and it's getting a little bit repetitive. Of course, it's watering, and it's so hard to keep up with it this time of year. But the key is to do it as early in the morning or as late in the evening. But now it's still pretty early and that sun is baking hot. So make sure you get it on the soil rather than on the foliage, or else you'll scorch the leaves. And also make sure you give everything a really nice good drink so the roots go downwards rather than staying up at the surface. And then hopefully you should be doing all that you can. So how was your holiday, Luke? Good to be back?
Yeah, it's really great to be back. I had a great time away, but kind of slightly worried about the plot. I knew it was in safe hands, but I was slightly worried. And to be fair, it was absolutely brilliant coming back and seeing like the new beds and the kind of all the herbs up there.
Are you pleased with it? It looks alright,
so
doesn't
happy.
it?
Thank you so much. Brilliant.
And my sacrificial broad beans have certainly been sacrificed. But at least the chickpeas are still looking okay, so I'm just going to really protect them, I think.
Yeah, they look amazing. I was really kind of quite surprised how well they're doing on it.
They're attractive, aren't they? But yeah, plenty of water to keep them going and strong. And the slugs seem to have kind of slowed down a bit.
Yeah, I do have a slight confession to make when it comes to the slugs. My half was dying a little bit, and I think it was partly slugs, partly just bad luck, I feel.
Yeah.
But I did slightly replant some rocket, and even that got mullered down, so I think you won fair and square.
Goes to show, cheating doesn't pay.
It doesn't.
And do you have any other projects that you're planning at the moment for the next month or two?
Yeah, so my next big project will be finishing off the seating area. So I've got all the seats in now and kind of dug the holes so it's nice and level. I've got like a bit of a circle of kind of just edibles I can just sit and pick at and kind of munch away in the evenings.
Sounds good. A cup of tea, loads of soft fruit, place to sit down.
Living the dream, it's great. Let's move in, it'll be fine.
Sounds good. Luke and I have been wondering how we're going to solve the problem with water shortage. So we're putting in a water. We're going to put some felt on the roof, and then any water that falls down here will be caught in the bin. The council gave all the plot holders here some bins to use, so we are making the most of ours. This has a lid, which is an added bonus because you don't want small mammals and birds and leaves falling into the water. So it has a lid of some kind that just saves that issue as well. And the lovely thing is, as well, is that plants really like rainwater. It has a lot less chemicals in than tap water. July is one of my favourite times of the year, when summer fruits are ripening and ready to be picked. I'm really keen to meet as many people on the allotment throughout this year as I can, and one particular person has such an important part to play. Local community about horticulture for 4 years. Hi Sarah.
Hi.
It's looking amazing here.
Thank you. It used to be 3 allotments which hadn't been touched for maybe 2 or 3 years, and we got a lovely big grant from the lottery to build a propagation place,
Right.
part of which was this garden.
What's the kind of aim of your project?
2 things. One, to supply vegetable plug plants to sell to the allotments, because it's very hard, especially up on a hill like where Luke is, to start little plants. Down here we've got lovely soil, and volunteers helped us grow those vegetable plug plants, and at the same time they had training in horticultural techniques and cultivation in the garden, and they take a harvest home at the end of the day.
And are you pruning a gooseberry now?
Yeah, this is gooseberry invicta, and you can do a summer prune, and I think, considering the weather conditions, it's a good idea. It'll open the bush out. It will mean that the air flow is better, less likely to get mildew. And the aphids like the sappy ends of the new growth, so we're going to take off the laterals, so that'll discourage them.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll give you a hand.
Yeah, indeed.
Is soft fruit a particular favourite of yours?
We wanted something we could take cuttings for, because again it's good for horticultural knowledge as to how to take cuttings in winter. But I particularly like white currants.
So what is it you love about white currants?
Firstly, they're so beautiful. They look like jewels. And I love the flavour. It's like a muscatel grape, which is really unusual.
I've made jams with them and found they're really good for jamming because they're so high pectin, aren't they?
Yes.
But
sticky.
But yeah, I'll have to try one of yours. Maybe I'm not growing them right. Back on the plot, Luke and I are really keen to add our own soft fruit collection. and are introducing our very own blueberry bush. Remember when planting blueberries to always plant them in ericaceous compost. And to make things easier, plant them in a large container with mulch on top. Place the pot in a sunny spot, keep the soil moist, and you will have lovely blueberries in no time. The allotment is looking really full at the moment, and now is the time you're starting to harvest, but also looking to make the most of the space you have. Hence why I'm using containers. It's a really great way of saving space and using every tiny little corner where you could potentially fit something edible. And the great thing about it is I'm using lots of upcycled things. We've got tins, this is an old pan, and you can put anything in them. You just have to remember a few key things. Number one, keep them really well watered, especially in this kind of heat, because they'll dry out really fast. And secondly, always make sure you feed them, especially with any kind of fruit or veg, because they need extra nutrients compared to other plants. Because normal plants will get their goodness from the ground, and in these pots, they haven't got the chance to do that. Now, the great thing about containers is it gives you a chance to grow things that you wouldn't ordinarily be able to grow in your plot. So if you have a certain soil type or a certain condition, you can change them depending on what you put in your container. Gilbert gave me some callaloo seeds. Thank you so much. Which we're trying in an upcycled wicker basket, which is really nice. But just one thing about allotments is there is so much wildlife here. Some you notice more than others. Luke and I have noticed some animal droppings up the top of the site, and the bug hotel's been completely wrecked by something. So we thought we'd put some cameras around so we can see what we find in the dead of night, although I don't know what we will find.
I'm a little bit worried, to be honest, but badgers.
Badgers,
Yeah.
foxes, or maybe just the local cats. Spring watch, eat your heart out.
Well, I hope for Francis's sake it is cats and not badgers or foxes or even worse, rabbits, because we have a rabbit problem here at Longmeadow. In fact, people always think rabbits eat lettuce. They don't touch the lettuce here. They ate all my peas. I re-sowed them, put them netting round to protect them. They've germinated pretty well, and with any luck, I will get a harvest, although it is very late in the day for peas. And the other night, the night before last, I was out here watering a lovely set of borlotti beans, growing well. Came out this morning, the whole lot have been eaten. You turn your back for a minute and you're attacked. Well, the rabbits or the pigeons haven't yet attacked my step-over apples, which is just as well, because they're looking pretty good and are a good example, along with cordons and espaliers, of growing lovely fruit in any size garden. But they will need training to keep them small. You can see here how this is really vigorous growth coming up, and all that has happened since April. So to keep it small, you've got to prune it, but you must prune it now in summer. If we prune now, that will restrict growth. And if I take this back, you can see there's an area of slight swelling of the stems. And that swelling indicates that it's forming a spur, and the spur will carry fruit. So cut back to the slight thickening of the stem. Now, of course, this doesn't only apply to restricted forms like step over or espaliers. You can do this with a big apple tree. And every now and then it's a good idea to summer prune an apple tree, to open it out, let light and air in, and then in winter you can continue the process. I do have an extension of the horizontal stem here that become part of the permanent framework. And now, all the way along, we've got little knobbly spurs covered with apples. The sun can get at them, they're ripened, it's not taking up any space at all, but it is giving me a couple of dozen potentially delicious fruits that I can eat in autumn or even store right through the winter. Those are looking good. Now, the health of our plants is an integral part of the beauty and enjoyment of our gardens. But right across the globe, new pests and diseases are being discovered all the time, and this is a real threat to the biosecurity of us here in the UK. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, has been concerned about this problem for a long time now. So Adam went to his home at Highgrove to discuss this with him.
Britain's green and pleasant land, with its rolling fields and lush woodland. It's known the world over, but it's constantly under threat. Climate change, increased travel, and movement of plants around the world has escalated the risk of new pests and diseases spreading to the UK. The scary thing is that some of these pests and diseases, if not controlled, can not only devastate the UK landscape, but also our gardens too. These ongoing threats to our plants and our trees are an increasing worry for His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. I'm in Gloucestershire at Highgrove, the private estate of the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. The grounds are beautiful, with a collection of gardens all created by the Prince himself. His Royal Highness also oversees 2,000 hectares of woodland across the Duchy of Cornwall estate, which is spread over 23 counties. Back in February, I was invited to a meeting at Highgrove with members from across the horticultural industry to discuss the problems being caused by pests and diseases and exactly what could be done to deal with them. One of the outcomes was Action Oak, a campaign launched at the Chelsea Flower Show this year to help protect our iconic native oak. It's made up of charities, environmental organisations and landowners who are using their combined knowledge to help safeguard these beautiful trees. Today, the Prince has invited me back to Highgrove. I wanted to ask him what he thinks we as gardeners should be thinking about and need to know about biosecurity. But first of all, I want to know where his passion for plants has come from. So the question I want to ask every gardener...
It was probably partly to do with my grandmother's wonderful garden at Royal Lodge in Westgate Park, where I spent a lot of my childhood. And I remember being absolutely riveted as a child, wandering about in little paths and things and looking at all the plants. And it was a wonderful woodland garden with masses of azaleas and rhododendrons, and the smell and everything had a profound effect on me, I think.
It's all those, and then you've got those, you carry those memories, don't you?
Then you want to do things as you get older. Really, it's only when you have somewhere of your own that you become particularly keen. But we had as children, my sister and I had a little plot.
Yeah.
At the back of somewhere in the Buckingham Palace garden where we grew vegetables and things.
Do you know, I had my nan on the allotment where they lived, a tiny piece of slate with Adam painted on it. Started off exactly the same way, in a way. I think yours was probably just slightly grander, obviously.
I don't know why, but I also grew to love trees. I mean, they always fascinated me.
What is it that you love about the UK landscape?
Part of it is its variety, but also the way in which the hedges and the hedgerow trees, the whole intricate pattern of the landscape, particularly, I mean, if you go up to the Yorkshire Dales and Cumbria or Lake District, that sort of landscape is magical.
We're here today to talk about pests and diseases.
Yeah.
I'm petrified. I've got 4 children. I'm scared in a sense, I suppose, the landscape that I'm going to leave for those. I mean, when did the pests and diseases really come on your radar?
Well, you see, but I remember Dutch elm disease.
Yeah.
All those years ago, and that was totally devastating here in Gloucestershire, because the whole of the landscape in Gloucestershire was these wonderful great elm trees all through the field, all the hedgerows everywhere. And now, of course, we're faced by a multitude of threats
exactly.
of every kind of disease.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a death list that's got 1,000 pests and diseases, and 100 being added every year. What's your biggest fear?
Well, the biggest fear is we end up with a wasteland here, having seen more and more of these pests, particularly from the Far East coming here. Because there's all these caterpillars and, strange things. They've all got extraordinary names like the emerald ash borer and sudden oak death and acute oak decline and one thing after another. And people love the ancient oaks in this country. Yeah. And there are magical remnants of some of these forests. We are a nation of gardeners as well. But somehow people don't quite realise yet the problem. The difficulty, I think, has been that the nurseries are the ones who really do need to react quicker in terms of quarantining.
Yeah.
I mean, I only get my trees now from a nursery which does proper quarantining.
Yeah.
But it's one of a minority. Emergency approach to this. We haven't got any time to waste, because I went to visit Heathrow Airport a few months ago, and I was talking to these marvellous people who try to prevent all this coming in, but they're overwhelmed by endless stuff that's brought in by people in their baggage or whatever. I think people realise just how dangerous it is unless you know that where you're getting the plants from has a proper biosecurity policy in place.
If you had one bit of advice for gardeners at home, what would it be?
Talk to the nurseries where you're getting your plants from and ask them, where do they come from? Have they been properly checked or quarantined? Have you got a biosecurity policy? Because of the risks now we're facing of all these pests and diseases. And with climate change adding to these huge challenges, and because of the warming up of everything, more and more of these pests and diseases can flourish here where they couldn't have done before. So we have to take this really seriously. We're faced with a multiple series of threats in all directions.
And we are literally
to the integrity of nature herself, which, if you don't mind my saying, is something I've been trying to say for the last 30 or 40 years.
I would say that there was a lot of people that sort of ignored, and so much of what you've said has actually come true. All I want to say is thank you very much, because the time that you've given me, I'm really hoping that a few people at home will be listening and it might make a difference to...
I hope so, because it'll make a big difference, hopefully, to the future and our grandchildren, who we hope will be able to share the magic of the British landscape.
I do think that it is to His Royal Highness's lasting credit that he has had a long-term interest in this subject, and that for most of us, we're coming to it rather late in the day. In fact, we spoke to the Horticultural Trades Association, who said that they were delighted that he was raising awareness and that quarantining trees was one effective way of ensuring biosecurity, but not the only one, and that it wasn't always as effective in a range of other plants. And they said that they were working with the government to try and form a regulatory system to ensure maximum practical biosecurity. So I think for all of us who are affected by this, and in effect that is all of us, we need to keep informed, aware of what's going on, and of course we will here be letting you know everything that we discover as and when it happens. Head Forester, Geraint Richards. Have a look at this. This is a Hemerocalis, or daylily bud, but it's malformed, and that's caused by a tiny little insect that arrived in this country in the 1980s and has slowly spread. Because inside this flower bud will be minute white little Hemerocalis gall midges. Now, if I slice that open, and it is very small, and my eyesight isn't very good, so I'll see if I can see it. And they're just a millimetre or so long. I can't actually see... Oh, there we are. Yes, I can. That tiny little wriggly worm there, just above my thumbnail. And that is doing the damage. They eat the inside. It distorts the bud, doesn't flower. Then they drop to the ground, and the larva will overwinter in the soil, and then the cycle repeats. So what you have to do is pick the flower head off, the distorted ones, and destroy them. And that will break the cycle. But that little wriggly thing that's on my thumbnail now can completely wreck the display of a whole Hemerocalis. And I will destroy that. I won't put it on the compost heap. I certainly won't let it drop on the ground. Hello, Nellie. Have you ever seen one of these before? You wouldn't like it. No. You're one of the pests, aren't you? Good girl. Okay, come on. Now, it's completely wrong to think of the garden as a series of traps and pitfalls set out to make life difficult. It's not like that at all. Gardening should be fun, or else you're doing it wrong. And it's always good to go and meet someone who can celebrate a life well lived in gardening.
I absolutely love working with blooms. They brighten everywhere up so much. My name's Harry Cook and I live in Loughborough with my wife Pat. We've lived here for about 52 years and we've seen such a lot of changes in our time. We've got a very busy roundabout outside now that is constantly full of traffic. When I started with Loughborough in bloom, the whole area on the roundabout looked very untidy. So with permission from Leicestershire County Council, started to look at ways of improving it. Plants that's going to give me blooms that the judges will like as well. My favourite plant is Petunia Tidal Wave. They're fantastic because you can do anything with them. You can trail them, you can climb them in a cage, they'll climb up to 3 foot high. You don't need to deadhead them, and as long as you keep feeding them and watering them, they grow so quickly you just can't believe it, and they give a magnificent display. Begonia's summer jewel is very reliable. That one is a basket begonia. Once it starts going, it'll flower all year and you get a beautiful display from it. I had an incident, it was the year 2012, opened the gate and this guy in a white van was chucking all my plants in the back of his van. So I said to him, "What do you think you're doing with those?" He said, "I'm having these." I said, "No, you're not." I said, "They're mine. You take them back out again." I went and stood in front of his van and he started to take them out. The judging was taking place in about 3 days' time. There they were running away with my plants. In the next week, we'll have the RHS judges come to visit Loughborough in bloom, so they'll be casting their eye over my garden. I've managed to acquire 5 gold awards in the 8 years we've been doing it. Obviously, I'm very proud of that achievement. The comments are usually quite good. You just have to wait for the report to see what you've done wrong. At the back of my house, we've got an area that's called the Green Belt. It consists of 3.7 acres with a stream running through it, which is full of wildlife. When I retired, I could see the place was getting untidy. I took it upon myself that I'd like to see it looking nice again. This area, when we first started, was all covered in brambles, and it's all been cut back purely so that we can see the stream, and it's such a nice view up here. You can see the wildlife now. We've got the ducks up there, and we've even got an heron that comes as well. It's such a pleasant place. Even though we've got a busy road right outside, you can't hear the traffic, and it's like being in another world round there.
That's it.
Who's going to do this one?
I planted up hanging baskets, but when we got the raised beds, he's particularly been involved supplying us with plants. The children love that he's got special knowledge, and if there's something that we don't know, we know Harry's going to know.
This is our wildlife area for the children, to educate them all about the bugs and the bees.
I think, it's really nice because after school, maybe you could, walk down here, and it's not just an ordinary path. It's, really, really cool.
It's just nice. You just see, all the wildlife around, and it's just really nice.
Nature.
Gardening is so relaxing because time doesn't matter to you. You start doing things and you look at the clock and you've lost an hour, and and at the end of it all, you're creating something that's beautiful. I'm really proud of the whole area because it's developed into something special. It's just going to turn into an absolute beautiful place in years to come.
Well, I have to say one thing about Harry. I do admire a man who can wear braces with panache. He's got very good braces. And, of course, I love the display in his garden. But the key to it, using annuals like that, is keep them well watered, to deadhead where appropriate, and also to feed. This pot here with the Kabir scandens, the annual climber with the petunias, you've got the Japanese bloodgrass. This was only planted 6 weeks ago. It's been watered, but now it needs feeding. And the key to keeping that sort of display going is to feed once a week. Now, I'm using seaweed here. I often use homemade comfrey. Seaweed you can buy, and you could just as easily use a tomato feed. And all three of them are particularly good because they are high in potash. And that will feed roots, flowers and fruits rather than foliage. And that will keep the flowering going. If you get a high nitrogen feed, all you do is get masses of leaves at the expense of flowers. Now, still to come. Adam is at Highgrove talking to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, head forester, Geraint Richards, about the potential dangers of Xylella, which has wreaked havoc on the continent and is on our doorstep. On a brighter note, I shall be potting up sedums, which are exceptionally drought resistant. But first, we join Carol in the New Forest, where she is celebrating panthers.
There is nothing mundane or ordinary about agapanthus. They demand your attention with these huge great umbels of blue or white flowers on tall stems rising up from enormous clumps of strap-like leaves. They really are the stars of the summer border. Although agapanthus are often referred to as lilies of the Nile, they come from South Africa and they were first introduced into this country in the 17th century. But it was one particular species which was to have a huge effect on the hybridisation of agapanthus. It was Agapanthus campanulatus, a totally hardy species, and it was used to produce hundreds and hundreds of different cultivars of all sorts of shapes and sizes. When you first look at an agapanthus flower, you can immediately see the similarity between it and onions, alliums, and it's quite closely related. It doesn't smell the same though. First of all, you get these buds, and the buds are wrapped close together, but as it bursts asunder, all these flowers come up, and they open in succession from the outside towards the inside of this sphere. As the flowers fade, these great big fat seed pods are made. And when they burst, they're full of little black seeds, and you can grow your own from those seeds. This is some seed that I collected last year. It's from an agapanthus called navy blue. If you examine these seeds, they're fascinating. You can see that each one's like a tiny tadpole, and the whole object of the exercise is to sprinkle them onto the surface of the proprietary seed compost. And then just to keep them in place, I'm just going to sprinkle some gravel evenly across here. All you want to do is weight that seed down. And instead of watering with a watering can, which would wash away all that seed, you just put the whole thing into a suitable receptacle. When you see that the gravel on the top is damp, then take the tray out, stand it in a shady place. A few weeks later, you'll start to see the first seedlings developing. You won't know what those seedlings are going to produce until they begin to flower. But suppose you've got a plant that you want to clone. The easiest way to do that is growth. But all you do is go in with a suitable tool, and divided it up into nice big chunks so you've got a bunch of leaves, a good crown and loads of roots. There's a lot of discussion about growing agapanthus in pots, and a lot of people think that you should really keep them very, very tight in there because that helps produce flowers. I think the simple rule is, if it's flowering all right, leave it alone. If it's not, then pot it on, but only one size up. Otherwise, it luxuriates in all that new compost and it'll produce masses of leaves. And that's not what you want. You want loads of flowers. This delightful plant is Agapanthus Sweet Surprise. And the surprise is that when these deep buds open up, the inside petals are pale blue, and through the centre of them runs this single blue line. I think it's a delight. It's obviously very floriferous, so you're going to get bags of flower. This magnificent agapanthus is jacaranda, with these rich, deep blue flowers on tall stems. It's outstanding, and one of the very special things about it is it's probably the earliest of the agapanthus to flower. It flowers from June onwards, but look how wonderfully it associates with the plants in here. Isn't this a delightful combination? This small, compact agapanthus silver baby with this lovely ami. The flowers are just washed in pale blue, giving it this almost translucent quality. Once upon a time, people thought that agapanthus were really quite difficult to grow. Well, not a bit of it. When you buy your plant, add lots of good material to the planting hole. Your own compost is your very, very best bet. And perhaps sprinkle around a bit of organic fertiliser, fish blood and bone. Water it in really, really well, and then water frequently, especially if the weather is very hot and sunny. And every year afterwards, it will reward you with this display of beautiful flowers. In our gardens, we welcome plants from all over the world. Many of them come from South Africa, but perhaps the jewel in the crown is their arrival when I see those fat buds swelling. And I absolutely love these flowers that last all through the summer.
Now, the plant I've grown formerly in the borders, particularly the Jorga, sedums, or as they're known now as Hylotelephiums, although I think sedum is a lot easier to remember. And they didn't like the garden. It wasn't that the plants were growing badly, it was just our soil was too rich. It was like force-feeding something, then wondering why it was suffering a bit. And much later, I learned that the best way to grow sedums is to treat them rough. Give them really poor soil, good drainage, you don't need to water them, and they are as happy as anything. So they are a perfect plant for a really hot, dry summer. And if you grow them in a pot, you almost never need to water them. I've mixed a compost which is grit and coir with a little bit of ordinary peat-free potting compost. So there's very, very little nutrition. Now, this is a variety I've not grown before. Sedum spectabile stardust. And I've chosen it because it's got white flowers. It's relatively compact. So here on the mound, the white will grow very well with everything around it. And you can see that what they have are these very fleshy leaves. And that's where the water is stored. And as with all succulents, when you water it, you're not really watering the roots as such. You're watering the leaves. They draw up the moisture, store it, and then draw upon it as and when they need it. So if I pack 1, 2, 3 in there, that's going to give me a really dramatic display that almost which no other plants of the same size could provide because they would want more nutrition, more space for the roots to grow. Then I just pack round them with this gritty compost mix. They prefer full sun if you can give it to them, but they will grow in light shade. Now, just because they do well in drought, that doesn't mean to say you don't water them in, so that A, the roots have a fighting chance to start with, and B, it settles them in. The water sort of pushes the roots into the compost and makes a good contact. And I think that's a handsome plant. And of course, the other thing about sedums, which as we come into late summer is so important, is they are the best plant in the garden just about for butterflies and bees. Once you come wildlife to your garden, nothing is better. Right, that's that one, which is green and heavy now. I'm going to do one more, which uses sedum's really good foliage colours, as well as the flowers, which can range from white to quite a deep, rich burgundy red. Now this is a variety called Matrona, and you can see that it's got these lovely burgundy stems, and the foliage, which is slightly greeny, olive greeny purple, and then the flowers will be white touched with pink. Again, will look good here. Okay, let's put this up. Because that is crammed in, and the soil that will fit around the plants is very poor and largely grit, that means, amongst other things, that this will stay nice and upright. These are plants that carry on looking really good deep into winter. So they cover a lot of bases, and I can't imagine without them. Good. That's great. Now, I want to show you something growing in the ground. What we have here in the long walk, almost by accident, is a really lovely display, and I think it looks fantastic. We have 3 plants, which I think look terrific at the moment, that are perfectly adapted to hot, dry weather. Down the centre, you have Alchemilla mollis. It'll grow in sun, it'll grow in shade, and it is completely happy in these dry conditions. And this has been flowering like this and looking fresh for weeks now. The acanthus flowers, this is Acanthus spinosus, are leaning in and then growing up with real drama, and then rhythmically behind them you have the box, which was clipped, and the new growth is coming back and picking up the colours of the Alchemilla mollis. And of course this hot, dry weather is brilliant for box, because not only does it cope with it extremely well, but also it will not be at risk of box blight with this weather, because box blight needs humidity as well as heat. So all in all, this looks great, is healthy and happy and perfectly adapted to what seem like quite hostile conditions. But even if box blight is one thing that we don't have to worry about in this hot, dry weather, there is always something. And the buzzword at the moment is Xylella. And this is a disease that has wreaked havoc. And Adam is back at Highgrove talking to Geraint Richards, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales' head forester.
Talking to His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, it's pretty clear how passionately he cares about the threat to our gardens and the British landscape from pest and disease. And there is one that is really worrying the horticultural industry at the moment. Xylella is a very harmful bacteria which causes disease in a large range of woody plants. It was first identified in America, but in 2013 it had spread. It was found to be linked with the fast decline of olive trees in southern Italy. It has now been found affecting plants in other European countries, but so far there's only been one interception in the UK, an ornamental coffee plant, and that was destroyed to prevent it spreading. So Xylella is getting closer to our shores, and if it does make it, along with other pests and diseases, it really could destroy some of our most beloved trees and plants. It's a huge threat, and the Prince of Wales and his team working at Highgrove and across the Duchy of Cornwall are very keen to ensure that it doesn't happen, including head forester Geraint Richards.
I've had the privilege of working for His Royal Highness 22 years now, and I've had the sadness of seeing a lot of plant health issues in that 22 years. So, it's personally heartbreaking to see these trees in decline and dying.
Xylella is the one that, the industry's talking about now.
Xylella is something we should all be afraid of. I mean, it is only one of many plant health threats. We need to be aware of that, but it's a particularly nasty bacterial plant disease. It's got this very wide appetite, 150 host species it can affect, and that goes from the garden, lavender, rosemary, right into the wider landscape. Even our native oak trees could succumb to it. Now, it's not here yet. It's in France, Spain, Italy, but we really have to do everything we can to keep it away from here.
Our oaks are under threat, aren't they?
Do you know there's 2,000 species, it's believed, that are dependent on our oak trees, 2,000 other species. So in terms of biodiversity, that's how much they're harbouring, that's what they're contributing. And if we lose them, can you imagine the British landscape without the oak tree?
And that's the point you make there, is it's not just what we lose when we lose the trees and the plants, it's the knock-on, how that's going to affect our wildlife and, our makeup is quite scary.
More and more we're learning about the importance of trees to soil, to water, to air. Interestingly, to human health and well-being and other species. If you lose them, you lose all of those benefits. And the thing about trees, perhaps more than any other plant, is once they're gone, they're not very quickly replaced.
What can gardeners at home do?
We all have a responsibility here, for certain. And I think there are things we can do. The first thing I'd say is be aware. Be aware of this whole plant health biosecurity debate. So get to know what some of these key diseases are. Get to know what the symptoms are, what the host plants are. Be alert to what's happening. There are ways of reporting it, like on Tree Alert. If you have a worry about certain decline that you might see. And then I think there are other things, just about basic hygiene, cleaning your tools, cleaning your footwear, especially resist the temptation to bring things back when you're on your travels abroad. Because, I travel a bit, you travel, and we all see that thing that we want to bring home, don't we? It's lovely, I'd like that in my garden, but, enjoy it while you're out there. Don't bring it home with you, because you don't know what you're going to be bringing back with it.
Yeah, maybe take a photo.
Take a photo, absolutely. Don't bring it back.
Yeah. If I'm honest, it scares the life out of me what we might be leaving for another generation. But that said, it doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. I think us as gardeners just maybe need to be a little bit more mindful.
The one thing I would endorse right now is Geraint Richards' point about bringing plants in from abroad. Just don't do it. It doesn't matter if it's a special gift, if it's rare, if it's a cutting, if it's a seed, any kind of plant material, don't bring in, because the risk of spreading infection is just too great. If you're travelling this summer, you may notice posters in airports warning of the risk of bringing plants home from abroad. This forms part of the government's Don't Risk It campaign to help raise awareness of the increasing dangers of pests and diseases like Xylella reaching the UK. We're coming up to that time of year when we're collecting seeds, we're taking lots of cuttings, and a little bit later on we'll even be splitting plants. But we don't often talk about leaf cuttings. Yet quite a few plants, particularly succulents, do very well from leaf cuttings. And if I want more of the sedums I've planted, they will do perfectly well like that. And to take leaf cuttings from them is really simple. You need a container. You can use plugs, but I'm going to put them in this little seed tray. And a very, very free draining mix. 9 parts perlite to 1 part compost would be fine. This is vermiculite and coir seed mix. And the reason for this weak mix is you want absolutely good drainage and not too much nutrition. It's more or less just an inert growing medium that they can root into. Now, as for the leaves themselves, you do need a sharp knife. The sharper the knife, the cleaner the cut. The cleaner the cut, the less the risk of either damage to the plant or infection. And you're looking to take a leaf that is nice and turgid. You don't want one that's all floppy and old. And cut it where it joins the stem, across like that. So you've got a really nice clean cut point right at the base of the leaf. And if I take a couple from each stem, I'm not going to leaf. A medium-sized, nice, strong leaf that's growing and healthy is all you need. You don't want one of the old ones. And I can make plenty of new ones in this very simple method. So we have a leaf like that, and all you do is simply insert them into the compost so they're buried about a third of the way up. and they're a little bit slower than stem cuttings, but in a few weeks' time, you'll see little signs of growth, and a number of little plantlets will appear around the point where it joins the soil. The parent leaf, this will die back, but the new little plants can then be potted on and grown, so that one little tray should provide me with a couple of dozen new plants. Now, when you put them into the soil like that, you can either stand in water for a little bit so it soaks up, or just sprinkle some water on it. I've got a mist propagator, so that will keep the air nice and humid. But just as effective in its own way is simply water them, then put them inside a clear polythene bag. And the important thing is that the air is moist and humid rather than the soil. If you overwater the soil, there's a real risk that they will rot off before new plantlets are formed. In practice, they probably need watering every 3 or 4 days, and that's plenty. And in about 3 weeks' time, we should see signs of new growth. I find making new plants from cuttings of any kind one of those jobs that is deeply satisfying. So, here are some jobs to satisfy you this weekend. If you go to a lot of trouble to grow soft fruit of any kind, it's frustrating if you miss the perfect moment to pick them. So check them, and like these black currants, lift the leaves, harvest the fruit as it's ready, and then use it and enjoy that delicious freshness that growing your own always brings. For most of us, the first glorious display from our delphiniums is over. So now's the time to cut them right back to the ground. Water them when they're very dry, and this will promote a second flush of growth and new flowers, which will give a display in late August and September. Shallots tend to ripen sooner than onions, and when you see the top growth has died right back, it's time to lift them. Don't yank them out of the ground, but carefully ease them out from the soil with a fork, and this will preserve the basal plate, which means they will store much longer. Let them dry off completely. These Morello cherries could be a little darker and a little riper, but the blackbirds have been at them. I netted them, secured the netting at the top and the bottom and the sides, but still the blackbirds got in. And I've eaten about a third of them already, so I'm picking them all. And of course, Morello cherries are not for eating raw, but they do make fabulous cherry jam. And that's all we've got time for this week. But I'll be back next week on Friday at our normal time of 8 o'clock. But if you can't wait till then, the team will be at Tatton Park Flower Show over the next couple of days. So I'll see you here next week. Till then, bye-bye.